Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh saying today that the armed forces need to be able to respond to Chinese provocation at very short notice. When he was speaking to troops at the Pangong lake in Ladakh, and we showed you a clip, he says, the extent to which there will be resolution I cannot guarantee, even though the co-commanders have been talking. Now, over the last few days, the story seems to be fading in public imagination, but the reality is that the threat of the Chinese army is real and it is ever present. And in the entire Pangong region, from finger 5 to finger 8, as well as in the Depsang plains, the Chinese have not pulled back. Since the last co-commanders meeting, there has been no backward movements. Is this a cause for extreme alarm and concern? Are the Chinese going back on their words? How should the Indians be dealing with this? For perspective on this, I'm joined live and exclusive on this broadcast by General J.J. Singh. He's been governor in a very crucial northeastern state. He's been former chief of the Indian Army Staff, highly respected military general. Welcome, sir. Also with us for perspective is Colonel Ajay Shukla, former military man, now one of India's leading writers on national security. I want to go across to General J.J. Singh. If you could explain at the outset whether the Chinese not pulling back since the co-commanders meeting, there's been a virtual deadlock. It's not as if talks have collapsed. There may still be more talks, but whatever was agreed upon in terms of pulling back from Pangong and the other points of friction between the last meeting and now, and several days have passed since, there's been no movement on the ground. How concerned would you be, General Singh, with this latest Chinese betrayal and refusal to honor their word?
Rahul, to make matters clear, I would like to say that first and foremost, the intent with which China had moved its troops in this region, that intent was quite clear. It was aggressive. It was that by a surprise move, they might come and occupy certain heights, which will allow them to dominate this road from Shyok River, along the Shyok River to Daulat Beg Oldi. That has not succeeded. Secondly, Indian Army's reaction has been very quick, I would say, and they have built up enough forces to handle any future situation. And I would like to also mention here that we should study China a little bit more. We haven't studied it as how their psyche works, how their leadership functions, and President Xi Jinping is like a boxer who has been boxed into a corner. He wanted to do something to redeem his image, and I think it has not worked out. But the whole world is looking at this situation and are siding with India, I would say, except for an odd country. They feel that the aggression was done by China, and they tried to change the status quo of the LAC. Over the years, the LAC has been more or less defined by the physical presence of patrols and by troops moving there. Average Indians don't understand that, and there are 4 or 5 friction points where there's a difference in perception. So therefore, we do not want to make a big thing of it. Coming to the point of the question of how fast they will withdraw back, well, China is an emerging major power like India, and China has a face to save, and to save its face, it will try and do it in a slow and gradual manner. But they know that India will not allow them to stay in areas which they have occupied in their perception, in their side of the LSE. But I feel that their message has
so
been
the substance of what you are saying, General Singh, is that the Chinese, after having come in with so much aggression, now suddenly can't turn their tails around and go back, because that would be a major loss of face for President Xi Jinping internally to his domestic audience, and therefore they will go back, you hope, but you think they will do it in a protracted, gradual fashion. Colonel Shukla, do you share that sense of optimism that there has been some backward movement, which satellite pictures confirm, in Galwan, in the Hot Springs area? where there has been no movement in Depsang or limited movement in Pangong. General Singh of the optimistic view that they will pull back. They can't do it immediately, but let's not give up faith in the co-commander's talk. The disengagement may not be going as per the schedule that was agreed, but it will still ultimately fall in place. Colonel Ajay Shukla.
Well, Rahul, I'm not in the business of making excuses for the Chinese. As far as I can see, the Chinese are in occupation of Indian territory, and that is unacceptable to me. It should be unacceptable to everybody in India. It certainly should be unacceptable to the government of India as well. I think it also needs to be flagged very clearly that the places where you are, and many people are reporting that the Chinese have withdrawn, continue to be on our side of the LAC. In Hot Springs and in Gogra area, they came in 3 kilometers, they withdrew 2 kilometers, and the Indian side withdrew 2 kilometers as well. So the situation now is that the Chinese remain 1 kilometer inside our side of the LAC. Then there is a demilitarized zone of 4 kilometers, all of which is on the Indian side of the LAC. And then you have the Indian troops located 5 kilometers from the LAC. This is not acceptable. It should not be acceptable to any of us. This is not a disengagement, and this is not a sort of acceptable solution. It is not a reversion to the status quo ante of 2014. I beg your pardon, of 2019 end. Now, what is sort of crucially important over here, Rahul, is that, we need to stop being apologetic and saying that this is a disputed area. It is a disputed area, of course it is, but as Indians, we must be clear where the LAC lies and we must patrol to the LAC. Up till April 2020, we were patrolling up to patrolling points number 10, 12, 11, 13, and so on. Now suddenly we're not being allowed to patrol up to that. So we cannot rationalize that by saying this is a disputed area and there are disputed versions. Our clear stance is clear. India's territory extends till a particular place, and we will patrol till that place. And as long as the Chinese are stopping that, they are on our
So General JJ saying, what do you think should be done in the current moment? The reality of the matter is, disputed or not disputed, difference of perception, no perception, the Chinese army at this moment is on territory that India believes is legitimately theirs. The Chinese have promised to pull back, but we are nowhere close to status quo ante being restored. In the United States, some analysts are calling it a mini invasion of India by the Chinese. So even if that's a bit exaggerated, leave that on the side. There is presence of Chinese troops on Indian soil. Do we just let it be for the time being, say that the Chinese are getting a bad name internationally, the US is speaking against them and turning the screws really sharply, Japan is coming out strong against them, Australia is coming out strong against them, focus on an international international attempt to bring down China's image? Or do you think physically, militarily, tactically, we need to do something about the Chinese soldiers who are sitting on Indian soil? General Singh.
Yes. Rahul, firstly, China never expected what happened in Doklam in 2017. It was the Indian army which went in and said, well, you can't come anymore, and you stop your activities coming into Bhutanese territory because we have an agreement with them. The second point is that when they came in here, again, they were stopped in their tracks by the Indian army, and also they have agreed to pull back. I want people who are so-called experts, who have not served on the line of actual control or who have not seen the other side of this Tibetan plateau, not to pontificate. I think what is important is why China is doing this. For China, the road which we are making to the strategic base at Daulat Beg Oldi, which is also an air base, is very important. They fear India today, that India might outflank them and hit their strategic artery, the G219 road coming from Kashgar to Rudok. I hope people who are trying to be posing as analysts know a little more about the geography there and the geostrategic implications. I think China also has a fear that India might turn the tables on them somewhere or the other, and Indian Army and Indian Armed Forces are prepared to do that at selected points where we have an advantage. So let's not start fear-mongering amongst our people by saying that China will do this or will do that. Once the highest level leadership has agreed there will be no bullet fired for 40 years, no bullet has been fired. Here again, I am of the opinion that the highest level has been approached, and they said there will be no stupid skirmishes and brawls of the kind which we saw earlier. And therefore, we will try to keep a distance and prevent that from happening. The first phase of disengagement has happened, and de-induction will follow as the discussions take place in the future. But both countries have realized that it's not in
so
their
here's the point you're making. There's no point for fear-mongering at the special representatives level. Leaders on both sides have agreed that they will not be in an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation, that there will be a buffer zone between the Indian Army's deployment and the Chinese Army's deployment, which reduces the possibility of the kind of confrontation we saw on the night of the 15th of June. And therefore, de-induction will take place. It may not be immediate, but let's not panic. We've got the situation under control. There is no reason to create fear in the country. Colonel Ajay Shukla, would you respond to
that? I wouldn't respond to that. I would say that the Chinese are in Indian territory. The buffer zone that has been created is entirely in Indian territory. As an Indian, that is unacceptable to me. If the government, which for a long time denied that the Chinese were in Indian territory, the Prime Minister himself denied that the Chinese were in Indian territory. Now they're all admitting they're in Indian territory, but they're saying don't do scaremongering. The Chinese will withdraw. How and what do they rest this assurance on and this belief in Chinese generosity on? Heaven alone knows. But suffice to say, I think it's a good thing that at least today we are admitting that the Chinese are in Indian territory, in occupation of Indian territory. I guess accepting that is the first step towards creating the pressure on the government needed to ensure that they withdraw from Indian territory. This is not scaremongering. Scaremongering is to say that don't say anything against the Chinese, as some so-called army chiefs are saying on your channel, saying that don't say anything against the Chinese. This is in the government's hands. I would just point out to you, this is in the hands of a government that denied that the Chinese came into our territory. Let's hope that they now, with the benefit of public pressure, sort of create the conditions where the Chinese are left with no choice but to withdraw.
General J.J. Singh, have we done enough? This Chinese incursion requires India to reimagine. Just hear my question, sir. Reimagine how it. Okay, General, first you. Okay, go on.
Yes, Rahul, I want to mention to you that what point Ajay Shukla made, I don't think is relevant. He's harping that they are on our side of the border. There is no clear-cut defined line mark. How can he say that at all? There are a few places that the perception is differing. Therefore, let's accept it. Let's not make a brouhaha about that they are on our side by 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers. For all you know, our patrols have been going 8 to 10 kilometers into the perception of the Chinese territory. So should they go about it? Second point, I want Ajay Shukla to understand once and for all that by them criticizing and by them making a scene about what is happening on the border is exactly what China wants us to do. We are a democracy. They want the opposition to run around in circles. They want to try and make the government run around in circles. They want to try and demoralize the forces. This is what Ajay Shukla is trying to achieve. Please stop doing it and understand the deeper implications, the geostrategic implications. India is no longer afraid of China in the way it was 1962.
Okay.
Please understand that. And those of us who have seen these frontiers, we know it very clear that it is not possible for China now to do anything here. And I can tell you that the orders must have been given from the top not to have brawls and skirmishes of this kind, and for some time we won't have them.
Can I
General Singh, do you think India has done enough? One second, let me ask my question. General Singh, because this confrontation and the Chinese aggression calls for India to review how it treats China. We have seen 59 Chinese apps being banned. That was called a digital surgical strike of sorts that would become an international example. Other countries like the US are now thinking about doing the same to TikTok and some other companies. We've stopped them from bidding for certain kinds of projects. We've told state-run telecom companies not to buy more Chinese telecom equipment. Do you think of all the options available to India, we've exercised everything that we could, or do you think we should do more to push China back harder?
Rahul, I think India has exercised a couple of options already, and some are underway. And I have full faith in the leadership and the government of the day that they are aware. They are much more aware of the Chinese way of functioning. And I think Xi Jinping has gambled. It has not worked. And Xi Jinping now will also make sure that the world is now pointing fingers at them for the Wuhan virus. They will do something to prevent that. Other than that, I think the steps India has taken, and some which are more on the way, will give the message to China, and the world is going to stand by us because they also feel that they have been the aggressor. How can Ajay Shukla not have seen hundreds of trucks and guns and tanks over there? He didn't see those photographs or what? He's talking of 1 kilometer up and down. This is petty.
Okay, so Colonel Shukla, final words. You can look at that 1 kilometer tactically, or you could look at the larger geopolitical strategic picture that emerges. China in big trouble with the United States. In Houston, their consulate being shut down. Those pictures going viral, them trying to burn all the papers that were there. India now prepping for a Quad where Australia is invited. You've got Japan, the United States. We were saying hello to USS Nimitz. That sent a big message. There's a much larger game we can play when it comes to joining some of these democratic countries to encircle China. Is that not where India should be focusing rather than getting stuck on that 1 odd kilometer? How do you view this? Because since this clash, not just because of India's pushback, but for various other factors, most of which are of the Chinese own doing, China is under serious trouble internationally.
I don't think this is an and/or situation at all, Rahul, and I'm surprised that you say so. Absolutely, we should be putting pressure on China in multiple different ways, including joining the Quad, including increasing our partnership with the United States, including increasing and stepping up defense spending, which this government and the previous one have both been complicit in reducing to the level where the forces' capabilities have been reduced. But I don't think in any way that allows us to relinquish our claim to the line of actual control, which is a claim that we have maintained through thick and thin, which numerous patrols have done over the years to exercise that claim. All we are doing, and I'm surprised that a former chief can suggest that, is relinquishing the claim by getting up and saying this is disputed area. It may be disputed area, and it is disputed area, but at the official level, and General J.J. Singh really needs to understand this so that he doesn't repeat this ever on another channel again. At an official level, we cannot accept that China's claim is right and our claim is a disputed claim. Secondly, we cannot accept that our patrols...
But we haven't accepted that. We've said that we want status quo be restored. We've said that nothing less than China pulling back completely is acceptable. The Indian government and the Indian army are both categorical in saying that. I'm out of time, Colonel Shukla. Please wrap up in 20 seconds.
Okay, all I'm saying is that we cannot accept assurances on the Chinese behalf from Indian generals on television. We have to wait and see what the Chinese do, and we have to be prepared to counter them, and if necessary, to remove them by force from Indian territory.
You know, when the defense minister says you have to be prepared for any eventuality at short notice, yes, we are talking, but the extent to which there will be a solution, I can't guarantee. This is what he said publicly. You know, the intent from the government cannot be stated more clearly. This fracas is far from being over. The Indian government and the Indian army are deployed, and why we put this on the Newstrack tonight is, don't think for a moment the Chinese have packed up and they've gone back home and that this problem is over or this episode is over. It's not. Things could take a nasty turn any night, and that is a real and present danger which the Indian army is well aware of and our viewers needed to know as well. You've heard two completely contrarian perspectives on how India should deal with the presence of these Chinese troops and their unwillingness to pull back. I want to thank General J.J. Singh for presenting his point of view and Ajay Shukla for presenting a contrarian point.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kanwal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.